Attention all passengers. Wilford Industries wishes you a good morning. The temperature outside is minus 119 degrees Celsius. As we enter the Yukon territory of the former Canada, we remind you, for your personal safety, be prepared to brace. We are 6 years, 9 months, and 26 days from departure. At the tone, the exact time will be 0800 hours. And now, for your listening and viewing pleasure, Wilford Industries is proud to present the latest offering from darkloopsproductions, the Snowpiercers.
Snowpiercers, a podcast in which we, the head of hospitality, the social engineer, the director of intercar relations, and the lead brakeman, discuss TNT's fantastic series, Snowpiercer. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist from Illinois State University, and tonight we discuss Season 2, Episode 4, A Single Trade. Fellow crew members, please say hi to the audience and tell them a little something about yourselves, and we will start with Cianna.
Hi, my name is Cianna Greaves. I'm a radio producer and podcaster out of Chicago, Illinois.
Excellent. Leandra.
I am Leandra Parris. I'm a school psychologist at William & Mary.
And Stanford.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stanford Carpenter. I'm a cultural anthropologist coming to you out of Chicago.
Fantastic. So, you know the way we do this. Favorite line, favorite scene, favorite character. Who wants to start?
I'm still up in the air as to who my favorite character was this episode. But I would like to throw in my favorite line because it just simple line and it captures a whole slew of contradictions. And that's when Leighton and Wilford are sitting together at that little soiree, and Wilford says to Leighton, "Hey, you've really come up from being a stowaway to now being in charge of my car." And it's that moment when Leighton said, "With all due respect, sir, it's not your car. It's not your train." And what I thought was really interesting about that is it got me thinking. It just like there was a moment where like my mind just kind of went in 80 different directions. On one hand, we can talk about this as kind of Wilford, kind of making a side eye accusation, right? But the next scene that they cut to, one of the next scenes they cut to was Alex up in that little bubble, and you could see out just how long the car was, right? Or how long the train was, fading off into the distance. And it got me to thinking about how that moment sort of captures the problematic founding moment in any culture or any civilization, right? At what point do we say something is ours? Because that fade out to see that essentially Snowpiercer is the world. It is the world there, right? Like there's no other place that they know of that they could survive. So this claim to ownership, it becomes really interesting when you're really talking about the habitable world. Yeah. Because ownership then becomes life and death. And also that you've got this at the same time, even this notion that the people own Snowpiercer, right? Like this idea that the world has to be owned, I thought was really interesting and really laid out there. Like that was the intersection of all these ownership claims that to some degree you could say, well, does anybody own the world? Does anybody own all habitable space? And that just got me. It was a very momentary, banal exchange that somehow when brought together with the scenes that were being put forth and the storyline really opened up those questions for me.
Well, we begin with a sociological anthropological analysis of civilization, and you're absolutely right. I mean, for Wilford to say I own it, I mean, the idea of individual land ownership is a Western idea, right? There are most cultures in the world don't organize themselves around those principles, right? So the idea that one person can claim to own the entire world is pretty Western idea. And no, that's very cool.
It is his trade. He built it. He funded it. He created Snowpiercer. It was stolen from him, and he's been starving, eating,
right.
Got like MREs on Snowpiercer on Big Alice rather, for 7 years, like left for dead. I mean,
he's really pissed.
He's angry, and rightfully so. Everything we know about, I mean, Wilford is obviously a horrible person. I'm, not making any excuses for Wilford, but everything we know about Wilford, we really know secondhand.
Totally.
Well, but wait a second.
The Wilford that was, ordering hands and feet chopped off and, feeding the tailies, God knows what, was Melanie.
True.
And you can see the way that Big Alice is organized is very, very different than what's, has taken place on Snowpiercer. So I took exception to that line a little bit, because it is his train. I mean, technically it actually is my train. And you stole it. Melanie stole it. And I'm back. And
well, okay, so a couple of things. I actually feel like the event actually throws any ownership claim out the window. It throws it up, but even before that, it's any notion of owning that train is kind of antithetical to like anybody surviving on that train. And I think that's what I think is really interesting. Just on a practical level, like, or not any notion. There are some notions of ownership that work, but I think that we're also forgetting that ownership is a social construct, right?
Yeah.
That we as society decide that ownership matters, and we back up the social fact that ownership matters by having courts that are backed by police officers, that are backed by the state, that are backed by the state monopoly on violence. So your ownership claim means something because the state's going to defend it. It's not because it's not necessarily because you're going to defend it, because if it was just about that, then we'd be fighting all the time, right? But it's the fact that like we have laws, and ultimately, the state can take away, right? And the state is more powerful. But now we have no state. There are no states left. There's nobody left to enforce an ownership claim. So really, it's just a nostalgic moralistic claim to a bygone era to say, I own this train. That's my take on it.
Well, I will admit that Wilford saying it was a pretty much psychological phenomenon for him, right? It revealed his view of the world, per se. I'll be honest with you. There's a play to be made there that Leighton didn't make. And that's just to look Wilford in the eye and not say a word, right? Just because when you respond, you actually, it's not that you delegitimize Wilford's claim, but you make it clear that Wilford's claim is important to you. And if you're going to do a job like Leighton's, you don't want to let everybody know what's important to you unless it's going to work for you. So, and I got to tell you something about that scene, man. Whoever the hell invented those types of chairs to have a drink in, there's no way I'm going to have a drink with my elbows as high as my shoulders. I'm sorry. I wrote that. Who invented those things as real?
Especially if you're short like me, it would be like this. Like, literally like You know, like that was uncomfortable to watch. There's so many uncomfortable things about this show, but like oddly, Scott, I was in the same boat. We're like, what is up with these chairs? I mean, they're made for lap dances, is my guess. But
oh my God.
You know, I don't know.
Oh,
No, they're not made for lap dances because the whatchamacallit, the armrest comes so far out that it actually
they have nowhere to go. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But I actually thought it was interesting seeing those chairs. I mean, I actually had some of the same reactions you guys did, but I just thought it was cool because it made me think of how, you know, you're on this train and you have what you got. You don't really have a lot of productive capacity. It's not like you can just go to the store and buy new furniture. You just gotta kind of make do. And I like that. Yeah. I like that element.
I think the stage designer or whatever you call that person in the production crew probably worked with the writers and said, we need to make these two guys look as uncomfortable as possible while they're trying to look comfortable. Then that's precisely the kind of chair you use. Cianna, you look like you had something you were wanting to add.
I just want to, you know, this idea that, you know, at the end of the world, ownership doesn't mean anything, especially when we're looking at media and TV. Ownership is everything. You look at any kind of apocalyptic trope or any kind of media from that genre. When there is a scarcity of resources, ownership is everything. People lay their lives on the line for ownership. Whether it's Snowpiercer or it's, you know, The Walking Dead and Alexandria. I mean, having ownership over your domain is literally everything. It is everything that you have to survive and to create order and to create whatever semblance of a state that you can't. So, I mean, this idea that at the end of the world, ownership is moot and it's just a revolving door of who has power at that moment. I mean, I don't know. Not even having power at that moment, just it's all for the taking is it doesn't really hold water for me.
And I think it's interesting you brought up the power piece too, because we're talking about Wilford versus Leighton, like owning it. Let's be honest, Melanie still owns that train. She wasn't even on the train, and the entire train is still waiting on her to let them, like, she didn't appear at all, and she's still so present, every single piece of that. Like, they are literally waiting on her to save their lives. So, like, I don't know, like, I just think this whole conversation interesting when it's still Melanie.
Well, the owner of the train isn't even on the train.
Right.
I think the direct challenger to Melanie's ownership is actually Josie.
Yeah.
Because she's pretty much holding the tail together right now. If Josie says, you know, Leighton's out, we can't trust Leighton, it's a wrap on Leighton. I don't know if he really understands that whatever fragile piece they have is really being held together by Josie's good nature.
And I think she's going to get more people on Big Alice that'll trust her now that she's over there.
Yep.
She's going to be that, I think, conduit for both.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just see her really, and I'm fine with that. I think that's great.
I'm good with that.
She's the one who's been doing all the heavy lifting. Do it.
Yeah, after this episode, there are three main players, and that's Melanie, Josie, and Ruth. Right? They're going to be the power structure that emerges in the train, I think. And the two guys, go ahead and have your cockfight in the nightclub. Right? I mean, go ahead and say who's in charge. But we know who's really running the show.
And Andrea, is that her name? The night car?
Right.
Yeah, I think she's going to be a player too. Although I have to ask Audrey. I have to ask Stanford, did you miss Tristan? Is that what's his name?
Pardon?
Your man?
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why I can't figure out who my favorite is, because my favorite's gone. You know, but you know what? My man Tristan, he's out there working behind the scenes, doing everything that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. That's why the train is still running.
Doing all that thankless work.
Yep.
I get you.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
There you go. Well, I'm gonna jump in with my favorite line, and my favorite line is Ruth looking across the table and saying, "If you're referring to me, just come out and say it." And that's when Audrey says, Wilford still has his hooks in some of us. And she looks across the bar at Ruth as the committee's trying to figure out what they're going to do. And my favorite character was Ruth, because they are calling out a space for her to be the third major power source in the train. And she gave, Stanford last week, you talked to her about her being loyal to the train, and she gave a speech on that this week. And I'll tell you what, I think she's protesting a bit too much. And what I mean by that is, but I think she's going to be the one to take out Wilford. I think she's going to get pushed to the point where she comes to recognize the three women that are in charge of everything, and that, at least the way they're writing it, Leighton and Wilford are not the power. I mean, not the source that people are following. I think that what's also interesting to add on to that is that if Josie is the person who carries the faith of the tailies, Ruth is the person who carries the faith of everybody else. And I think that that's the other dynamic that is, at least to me, is really interesting. And I'm waiting for us to have a clarification as to who carries the faith of the people of Big Alice. The Aussie.
It could be. But I mean, we just don't know.
I think it's Alex.
Don't know enough yet.
I think it's Alex. Like at this point, I think she has friends. Like clearly, people admire her and like her and looked at her. I mean, like even when Wilford is having his little showdown about the Paramore comment, right? Like the other person in the room, and I always forget her name. And maybe who is it?
Sykes.
She looks to Alex. Like I think it's Alex.
I thought Sykes was very, very interesting. She has this very tough exterior. She looks like she stepped out of, I don't even know, like a Call of Duty.
It was like a Mad Max.
She opened her mouth.
I was going to say
she did her best Ruth. She's like, it's a contest.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like Sykes is probably, in another world would have maybe been Snowpiercers or Big Alice's head of hospitality. But, they just have the better uniforms.
Yeah, you guys are blowing my mind here, because now I can imagine episode 10 where Alex is running Big Alice. Melanie's back with Ruth running Snowpiercer. And
Zara has been demoted. Fired.
Are we talking Zara?
Zara's like, you told me to come back in 30 minutes, but like,
yeah. I have certain reactions to how they're writing Leighton and Zara.
Why are they shoehorning into this plot? So they're really trying their best to really get her in there and really get us to care about her. I don't.
Well,
go ahead, man.
But I feel like we're also watching the corruption of Leighton, right? Like what is, I mean, I'm looking at him as the leader, and what is, he's opened up the drug trade, and he's taking a woman who's clearly been brutalized, abused, and traumatized by Wilford. Yep. And just being like, oh, well, you need to take one for the team and like jump back into that. Like we're talking like she's even got the scars from when she slit her wrist, and not crossways, but we're talking the serious direction.
Legit. I don't know how he saved her, to be honest. As long as that was like, I don't know how that was possible.
I didn't understand I found the pimping out of Audrey really, really tasteless. I didn't think it was necessary. I think Audrey should have made that decision on her own.
Right.
Similar, I don't know if any of you saw Mad Men or watched Mad Men. The pimping out of Joan for the Jaguar contract was a real turning point for me in that show as a faithful Mad Men watcher. And the interesting thing is, like, it's not would Audrey do it? It's not how can Audrey do something like that. Victims of sexual violence are often forced to interact quite intimately with their abusers on a daily, you know what I mean? That's not really It's not a how question. It's just sort of like a, would Audrey do that? Would she do that?
And what did it do?
The way they've written Audrey, like, would she do that? Could she be so easily? I mean, I felt that she was coerced. Because they make it very clear that she wants nothing to do with Wilford. That she's terrified of the man. That she has, you know, been working through her trauma and the night car. That it's been, you know, incredibly therapeutic for her to have her position in the night car.
Yes.
I don't know that she would necessarily jump into a situation where she was being made that vulnerable. Again, and her whole arc has been strength, and I don't know. I don't know if Audrey would do that.
Not only that, I think that she was. When I think through the scene after hearing you guys talk, there was no plot movement because of that scene, other than learning more disturbing things about Wilford.
I don't know that pimping out victims of sexual violence as a plot device is. I'm not really here for it.
No,
and I found that very disappointing.
And then they basically use her trauma as a foil to reveal his psychosis, or whatever we want to call it. Yeah, I hadn't thought it through that way, but there really wasn't much. It didn't move the story further any more than to say things about him that I found disturbing at a couple of levels. One is, of course, God, this guy's just horrible. But the second is, do they need to write this guy this horribly? And what I mean is, you don't have to sit in bathtubs and get people to hurt themselves with straight ragers to be an American upper middle class elitist sociopath, right? You can have tons of wealth and close factories and do all kinds of sociopathic things without having to engage in that kind of behavior as well. What I'm saying is, by making him such an over-the-top psychological issue, they kind of, for me, they had the opportunity to examine why anyone would ever do the sort of own a lot of stuff and put a lot of people out of work. And because what they do is they justify it in some other way, like, well, I'm just trying to keep the market going, right? They find a way to turn that dissonance of the suffering there into a virtue for themselves. And we're not seeing him do that work because he's so psychologically bloated. So anyway, I think there's just a little danger there in assuming that you've got to be that kind of person to be a sociopath.
But another way to look at it is, and something that strikes me is, I was thinking, what is life and death on Snowpiercer versus Big Alice, right? And I was thinking about how life on Snowpiercer is very much about a class system, literally first, second, third, taily, right? Like rigid class system. And I talked about this a little earlier, and about how on Alice, it's much more flattened. Like, everybody's living the same except for Wilford, right? So there's only one or two people who are living better than everybody else, and everything. And there seems to be almost, in some ways, I would argue that Big Alice is closer to what Leighton is trying to, the structure of Big Alice is closer to what Leighton seems to be seeking, right? But then what is death, right? And I keep coming back to, when they want to put someone to death on Snowpiercer, it's interesting because it literally is about exposing them to the environment. It reminds me, we're going to take your hand, or we're going to take your head, and we're going to stick it outside, and your head's going to freeze, right? So it's like the environment doing it for us. There's almost like well, we're not really killing you. We're just removing Snowpiercer's protections, right? There's something about that that's very indirect. And I feel like it actually puts, and the way in which it puts a different kind of onus on the individual, right? Because the individual's like, play by the rules and you don't fall off the path. But if you fall off the path, then you're in a place where you die. Whereas on Big Alice, it is like so hyper personal and gruesome. Like the outside is something that they actually see as something that they can potentially survive with all. It's like death on there. What we've seen of death on there is literally getting into a tub with the oligarch, and then you have to actually kill yourself. There's just something, and I'm still trying to figure out what all that means. And it bothers me that it does actually bother me that they're making Wilford so uber psychotic, but at the same time, it's of note to me that life and death is so different. And I'm hoping that they're going to seek some sort of payoff for that.
I also want to say I don't need to see anyone else slit their wrist on this.
Yeah, I don't.
Neither do I.
I don't need to see it. And I mean, I guess they can go into a larger conversation about portrayals of suicide on media and TV and what it means to dramatize something so personal.
Yeah.
And painful for survivors of suicide. I don't know. For the shock factor with Kevin, okay. I mean, I don't get it, but it happened.
What?
But I'm not sure why we need to see Audrey's scars. I don't know why we need to see Audrey. I mean, it's such a long scene as well.
And it's so stylized.
Yeah, I mean,
that's one thing I actually wrote down when they were in the, and this comes back to what you're talking about. When they were all in a night car and there's a band playing and she's singing, and you know that all of that was recorded in a studio. It's like, no, man, let's just get some raw live sound in this scene, right? Let's hear what they hear. Let her sing the song. And I understand it that they want to stylize it and have different camera angles and stuff. But there's also something to be said for just letting the context speak for itself. And if you're going to do a scene like the bathtub scene, there's a certain, I don't know what the word, voyeurism, parasitic aspect to stylizing those kind of phenomena. Again, I'm not a movie producer, so I'm not trying to judge. I'm just saying when I saw it, it's like, is that romanticizing it? I mean, I was a little like discombobulated because something of that intensity should be, no, I don't want to use the word should, but I'll shut up.
I think they definitely were romanticizing it.
Yeah.
They were at least fetishizing. Is that a word? Fetishing it? I don't even know.
Fetishizing, yeah.
I think they're romanticizing at the point that Audrey and Wilford have become, it's sort of the romanticizing of abusive relationships in this genre a lot. I mean, I guess the most obvious would be the Harley Quinn Joker. I mean, when you go into some of these like Reddit feeds and some of these like, cosplay forums, and I mean anywhere really, you see a lot of people a lot of young people and kids who sort of look at that as love, and it's this gray line between, it's not a gray line, but it's a graying of the area between devotion and abuse and victimization, and I don't like it. I don't like it. That is not something that Audrey and Wilford share. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not, and sort of using suicide as a tool to explain the power dynamics in their relationship. I just thought it was very, very tasteless. There are a lot of things I did not like about this episode.
Yeah, it was not well done. Like the whole gaslighting of her was so quintessential abuse. Taken to a whole nother extreme, like, but I saved you, like, but you put me there, like, that is so, it's hard to watch that and not think, like, what's the point? Like, we've already established that she's terrified of you. We can use our imagination. We've already established that, like, you're not really like a great person, right? Like, I think it goes back to what you guys said before. We did not need to see something that's a very real thing that happens in today's society in a not much different context. Like, we didn't need that.
And I'm not sure what they were trying to say at the end of that scene where she's feeding him fruit and he looks submissive. She's sort of taken the power back and now Audrey has to get her hand. She don't. No, she absolutely does not.
No.
No, she does not. So
she has the power. She's taking the power back when she throws his ass off the train.
Yeah.
Right? Like physically throws his ass off the train. I mean,
why didn't you just kill him?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
Why doesn't anybody just kill him?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't have an answer. I mean, that's the thing. Like season 1, with him not there, it was just a story, and the dynamics between the humans on the train, I believed, and I didn't need uber psychopathy to enrich, or those relationships. I believe,
right.
The maneuvers people were making and such, and bringing him on board. There is this psychologization of everything that is very pro forma for, as you were saying, Cianna, this drama. I mean, this genre. I mean, Walking Dead tried a lot of this kind of stuff. And it's a, I don't know, for me, it's kind of a Tarantino descendant, kind of way of trying to dramatize these things. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying this season doesn't feel like rawly human as the first season did for me, even though it's so much more violent.
I love the scenes with Alex.
Yes.
And when he's being subtle, you know what I mean? But when he comes in this like weird, like mustache twirling,
We're sophisticated enough to pick up on it without that. Like, I'm not dumb. Like, you don't have to beat me over the head with it.
It's just very ham-fisted. In my opinion.
I also felt like the scenes with Audrey and Wilford kind of cheapened a lot of other elements of the show so far.
Absolutely.
In that, and I mean, hear me out on this, and feel free to disagree with me because I'm still thinking it through. But like the scene where Kevin slits his wrist in the bathtub, right? Mm-hmm. It read to me as this is the ultimate punishment for betrayal, but not just betrayal of him, but betrayal of Big Alice, right? So it is the form of execution. It's kind of like when somebody needs to be executed and you put them in a room and you give them the poison to drink, right? So that's how I read that, right? It felt sick and twisted because you've got naked Wilford in there with them, but that's how I read it. I read that as an execution, right? But when I saw Audrey in the tub with him slitting her wrist, it didn't read that way at all, right? Now it is just straight out abuse, right? And so in a way, I was not only offended and bothered by watching him try and coerce her into killing herself, right? But it actually took away from what was going on with Kevin, right? How that plays out. Coming back to my whole argument about what is life and death on Snowpiercer versus Big Alice, right? I felt like I also feel like as a way of showing Leighton's corruptibility, right? What we have done is we have shown his corruptibility in the most brute force, blunt, over the top, stereotypical manners. What's the first thing he does? The drug trade. So we have the black man with dreads starting up the drug. You know what I mean? Like establishing a drug trade. You know, one of the few memories I have from when I had dreadlocks was how many people assumed that I knew where to score drugs.
Right.
We have, and then what's the next thing he does? He pimps out Audrey. Another stereotype about Black organizational power, right? And I think and that's really starting to get to me. I want to see. I like the idea of watching him being corrupted, right? But I'd like to, for lack of a better word, I'd like to see some original corruption. I'd like to see him be corrupted, and in a way that doesn't have me wincing.
Yeah, no, you don't even know if the writers have thought through the things you've mentioned, right? I mean, for me, a lot of this episode was a foil for Wilford's character, right? And a lot of the characters were going through motions to clarify things about Wilford for us that in the end, I don't know that I'm that interested in. Because like I said, he's got no play left. And so if the premise is that his type of being is over with, I'd almost rather see that through the agency of the characters that are replacing him than using them as a foil to tell me what's wrong with him. So I hope they get off this. I hope we start seeing more of Ruth, Alex, Melanie, and Josie, their agency being expressed and sort of dominating the plot. Because we know Wilford's time is over, and I don't think anybody would have been too upset an episode ago if he'd accidentally been outside of the train. We knew we didn't need to see all of this to know that he wasn't someone we'd want to have in charge.
And there has to be, I mean, you can't have a villain that's a complete douche 100% of the time. No. It doesn't work out. Not when you have these loyal breachmen and people who are committing atrocities in his name over on Snowpiercer. I'm really stuck at the why at this point, because it turns out you've been living just fine for the past 6 years without him.
Yeah.
So,
no, and if you're a writer,
I'm not really sure what Wilford brings to the table at this point.
Yeah, I hope like, you know, you were talking about it being ham-fisted, and I hope that the writers feel that they've exposed enough of the gratuity, the despicability of his character that we can just move on now and look at what's going to come next. Because they did, like I said, I didn't feel they needed to do that, and then the way they did it, as you guys said. Any other favorite lines, scenes, characters?
I mean, I think I already kind of said it. My favorite scene is all of them sitting around waiting on that beep, and like Wilford's face when like it does go off is like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to pretend I'm happy about this. Like, that was nice, but
I love it.
Yeah.
But when he popped the balloon, I mean, that's the kind of villain that I want. That was great.
Actually, okay.
I was like, what a jerk.
It's also funny. It's also funny because he's like, oh wait, this isn't the time. My bad. Like he's so self-centered that he can't have the attention not on him in any way. And I was like, oh, that was diagnostic. So yeah, like I kind of agree. Like that one, I was like, oh, that was good.
And you don't have to do all that other stuff to be that evil, right?
I mean, separating a mother from their child, I think we're good.
Got it.
We don't need to pile on that. That's we get it. We get it.
Go ahead, man.
I felt like they missed a really interesting opportunity because so much of the show has been about broken trust and deception. And I was thinking to myself, why would you invite him over to see, you know, to see if he wins or loses based on whether or not Melanie pushes a button somewhere and creates a beep? I was waiting for us to see somebody in the head car, like when they reach a certain point, be like, okay, and they push the button to create the beep, i.e., we weren't ever going to allow for this to go Wilford's way. I was waiting for that. And then also as a viewer, for it to be like, for it to be like there's a group of people at Snowpiercer that knows that nobody really has any way of knowing whether or not Melanie's alive or not. that would have been more interesting to me. And it just seemed really weird that they would even set themselves up for a situation where, where the beep didn't come through. And at that point, Wilford would have pretty much taken over the train. Right?
No, that's really cool. And we could still find out that, in fact, there was no beep that Melanie created. That's what I love about the video games, is that when you're playing video games with someone at a distance and they're in some other town, all you're doing is making light patterns move, but you still experience it as an agent, right? And so that tone, boop, they all experience that as her. And having them all stand there and wait for her to be present through this simplest of events, which is a beep, I thought was a really cool social moment. And it could be the case that Melanie didn't press that button. We could still find all that out. So on the issue of why would they set it up that way, I think the writers think that what they're trying to do is because they had that meeting in the night car prior to Wilford coming to try to plan how they were going to do. And the idea is to put our best foot forward. In a democracy, we try to share information and we try to celebrate everybody's achievements. And I got the impression that's what the night car people were trying to, or the Snowpiercer people were trying to do, is recreate civilization in a way that wasn't just dependent on one guy's opinion. And I mean, there's a point where Leighton says, this is our moment of faith. Melanie has to press that button. Now, whether or not you as viewers give that the psychological weight the writers wanted you to take from that is up to the viewer per se. There were so many other things going on with Leighton I found distracting that I just didn't find myself persuaded that it was this big leap of faith that they were jumping into and bringing Wilford over. So it didn't really work for me that way, but that scene with the ping did. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Melanie totally would have had it set up to go off, regardless.
She probably did.
She probably did before she left.
She's the only one who knows.
It was probably on a timer.
Just saying.
Well, she built it into the parachute thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. She's like, it's not going to go off right at the square footage that they're expecting. We're going to give them a little tension so it feels real.
It's exactly that's fantastic. We should, when the writers see our podcast, they're going to say, damn, they figured it out. Absolutely. What do you guys think of the scene in the night car when they're having a party with Leighton and Zara? With Leighton sitting there with his arms around Zara, they're listening to the singing going on, and
it's a no for me. You're not on vacation, sir.
It's not a New Year's Eve party.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna kiss at midnight.
And Josie. I mean, Stanford, you said something about his character early on about sleeping with all these different women and such. And, I try not to put my moral compass in that world, but to have a woman who you've been through hell and back with, suffering, and then you're with this other woman in this affectionate way because she's carrying your child. I mean, that's about as patriarchal.
In all fairness, Zara is his partner. Prior to them boarding the train,
she was, yes.
Zara was his partner,
right?
I guess prior to the second ice age. I mean, the plan was always, I guess, for them to have children and start a family. Which I think is really interesting, the way that they have written Zara, that she actually feels like an intruder. And it feels as if she's taken something away from Josie, when in actuality, it is Josie who is sort of the third wheel in this, in their relationship. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I agree with you 100%. That Leighton is definitely He is a promiscuous lad. Because they were separated, but Zara didn't die.
Right.
She wasn't dead.
Oh, and she left him, by the way.
Did she leave him?
Yeah, she was a tailie.
Yeah, she left. They were separate. Did she? I forget what happened.
She made the choice to leave.
She made the choice to leave.
Yeah.
She was like, I have to do this. I can't take this anymore. And
right.
That's why everyone dislikes her.
So Stanford was
and then she came back and fingered Josie in front of everyone.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And now he's holding her belly. I don't know. For me, it was why I was a little surprised. Why are they writing Leighton this way? And maybe it goes back to some of the things Stanford was talking about earlier. What? I'm not saying they don't seem to.
It's interesting because they're as much as they're talking about class, I actually feel like they're having trouble with the intersectionality of class and gender and class and race.
Well said.
I'm not saying that they've completely failed, but and I kind of really welcome having an attention paid to class, because we don't pay enough attention to it in the US, I don't think. But I also think that they're also missing the importance of human moments, right? Like we see it occasionally, like a lot of the moments we talk about as our favorite scenes, it's like, oh, we like it. We like seeing when Alex and Wilford are together, right? We like seeing that, like those are the humanizing moments. I mean, I felt like the moment with Zara and Leighton was really interesting when he's getting ready for this big party and he's putting on the tie, and then she's like, no, you got to take off the tie and you got to, here, roll up your sleeves. You got to look like a man of the people, right? And that was also interesting to me, because the fact that they're obsessing with him looking like a man of the people kind of implies that they realize that he's no longer a man of the people.
Yep.
Yep.
No.
And that, and we should be, or at least I wish that we had more moments like that, as opposed to really in your face moments.
Feel that I agree with you 100%. All the human moments, for me, were all of Josie's scenes. I mean, what a performance. I mean, I was emotionally and physically in pain watching her try to maneuver from her bed into that wheelchair.
Yeah.
I mean, when she finally saw Miles and Miles, that was a very, very powerful scene. I mean, I'm very interested to see the Josie that emerges from Big Alice, if she chooses to leave Big Alice. I think Josie is just biding her time. I think that's just the message that she's throwing out to the tailies as well. I think she knows that Leighton's time is limited. His treatment of the tail, this whole thing with they're being attacked, someone is going around maiming people on the tail, and he's scolding them for open carry. What were they carrying?
He's not the same hard-nosed detective he was.
He's living it up in first class, and he's still telling them to hold on, wait, your time will come.
No.
I'm just not sure when and what is the plan for the tail.
Yeah, I don't think they know what to do with him. I think they're gonna have to sacrifice him, make him humble, go back to, and I don't know. That's my prediction. Yeah.
Well, I think that the irony is, if they played him as, instead of playing him as like the revolutionary in chief, played him as the detective in chief, it would actually be much more interesting, right? Like he has not used any of his detective skills, any of his and because part of his detective skills at the very beginning that we're introduced to was his ability to read people.
Yep.
He's having trouble reading Leighton. I mean, I'm like, I don't, it's like winning the revolution sucks away your powers.
His interactions with Ruth are just, for me, completely wrong, written completely wrong. that he would know in an instant Ruth is the power source of the train, period. And he would know in an instant to include her in everything and to never express any public doubt about her allegiance. And him kind of, there's that whole scene where he says, there's another passenger in the second class I need you to come see when they're putting the gel on the gentleman whose arm's been frostbitten. And she starts to leave. And Ruth says, well, hospitality should escort them there. And he says, oh, he kind of scoffs. Oh, he actually publicly scoffs at her. And I thought, dude, that is such a minor league play. Even if you don't like her because of the role she had prior to the revolution, the guy you were in season 1 would know what Melanie told you was the truth. Mm-hmm. Keep Ruth close. And I'm just like you said, I'm surprised they're writing him that way, because the guy last season would have done everything he could to keep her on his side. Mm-hmm. And then to see Ruth mix a martini, take a drink of it, and then say, what does she say? Melanie doesn't understand. I just love the fact that she even cares about what Melanie thinks, right? And what doesn't she understand? Your man Leighton, right? In other words, Ruth is actually taking Melanie very seriously in her own thoughts and thinking, why didn't she coach this guy better when it came to dealing with me? I don't know. I just really like the psychology of how that's all being played. And I'm a little disappointed that Leighton doesn't seem to get that.
Mm-hmm. I think Zara's ultimate play is to totally disenfranchise Ruth from the rest of the train. In her fantasy, it's going to be a Leighton and Zara sort of king and queen of Snowpiercer.
I mean, if that's how they try to play it, it just ain't gonna work.
Right.
It just ain't gonna work.
Excuse me.
What'd you guys think of the 2 kids smoking weed in the bubble?
Oh, that was, I mean, other than the fact that one of them's a horrible person, I thought that was actually a very sweet moment. I always like it when Alex gets to kind of be a little bit of a kid, a teenager, you know. It's also visually very nice. It was a nice visual.
It was a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right.
I kind of wish, again, it wasn't with a serial killer, but...
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's... Go ahead, Steve.
LJ is definitely going to use that information that Alex gave her about missing her mom against Alex and, you know, try and buy herself a spot, not just on Big Alice, but by Wilfred's side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I felt like it was a moment that I saw what they there's something that I felt like they were trying to do that they kind of failed in part because you know of what's her face's hidden, you know, not so hidden agenda is showing just the utter disconnect between the people on the train and all of this high drama amongst people who are vying to control the social order of the train, right? I felt like that was supposed, I mean, it was interesting seeing those two kind of harken back to, well, it doesn't matter what side we're on. Remember what it used to be like, you know, and we're still like, you know, and I thought that was interesting. And I actually thought it was interesting seeing that parallel with the 2 Australians, right? It's like, I'm the last Australian. No, I'm the last Australian. No, we're the last Australian. And then all of a sudden it's like, how do we maintain contact? Because we're the last of our people, right? That, I actually thought that was really interesting, because what it really shows is that no matter what they're doing up top, there's a ground game where, like, at a certain point, people are going to start meeting each other, and it really is going to become a people's movement. It becomes a people's movement when you have relationships develop amongst the proletariat of both trains.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that wasn't an organic relationship. I mean, between Amelia and Murray, I mean, they were sniffing out who of the people that came aboard Big Alice. They were looking for a weak link, someone that they could turn. I mean, are they necessarily the last only Aussies on that train?
Well, he claimed that as a tailie, right? I don't know anybody else on the train who claims, but
did he claim that as a tailie in previous episodes?
I think in the first season he claimed he was the last Aussie.
Okay.
There's like a whole like thing between him and one of the brakemen about I'm the last Aussie.
Exactly. And there is that tension there because I think he was part of the plan to suss out what's going on in Big Alice. And I think he did target her.
Yeah.
And I think there was also this nice authentic reaction to her Aussie-ness. So there was this nice, hey, we got this organic past that we can share. And, oh yeah, I'm supposed to get information from you. And so when he gives her the goggles, it's just as a viewer, it's this nice moment of tension where is he playing her? Does he really taking care of her? What's he doing there? And I like when they can make a simple act like that be rich and non-psychotic, just rich and interesting. And we'll see what those goggles show up. I mean, where they show up later in the season.
I thought it was interesting that the prize winners of Damien Ho, Euler Bob, and Amelia. Is there more diversity on Big Alice than there is? Is it a more diverse population than Snowpiercer?
It looks like it.
It looks like it.
More diversity, less class distinction.
Yeah, just a little more Roman emperor type social vibe.
And the food isn't as good. It's a deal breaker for me.
Exactly. So that about wraps it up for tonight's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Crew members, please tell the audience where they can find you on social media, and we will begin with Stanford.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Clubhouse at SW Carpenter. On Clubhouse at 5 p.m. Central Time on Thursdays, myself and Hannibal Taboo, we do a roundup of the week's new comic books.
No, fantastic. Leandra.
Hi, I'm Leandra Parris. You can find me on Twitter at Parris Leandra, at Parris Leandra.
Excellent. Cianna.
And Cianna Greaves. You can find me on Twitter at CICIGREAVES.
Excellent. And you can find me on Twitter at @dark_loops. You can find all episodes of the Snowpiercers at the Dark Loops Productions YouTube channel. If you'd like to give feedback about this episode or any other episode we've discussed, just please leave it here on this YouTube page, or you can send an email to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to read it at the end of our next podcast. So there it is, from all of us to all of you. Big hugs, and remember,